Great. So I love to demonstrate what needs to happen with good concrete examples. And I want to give you some industry examples that we at Every Breath Counts, we love to highlight good work and we love to criticize bad work without fear or favor of any partner. So we sort of pride ourselves on that very candid approach. So what needs to happen? Let's look at some of the industry, I would say, recent developments that are exciting us. So increased domestic spending we talked about, governments needing to put more money into medical oxygen. Recently, Nigeria, which is probably the most important country you could argue because of its size and its gaps and the number of lives that are at stake. Nigeria really needs to guarantee access to medical oxygen in its health system. So they have a wonderful health minister, federal health minister, Dr. Mohammed Pate. All of the industry people should know Dr. Pate and his team. They recently struck a national partnership with a group called Global Gases, I'm sure you know them, to work with Nigeria to make sure they have the oxygen they need. They announced that partnership to great fanfare, very transparent about it. Global Gases is not one of the biggest players. It's a relatively new player. So there's potential there for Nigeria to get a value for money partnership. So we're excited about that one. You can go online and look at that. We have been very honest and upfront about the lack of competition in the liquid industry, particularly. It's dominated by large players based in the US and Europe. And many countries, if they have a liquid oxygen provider, they have one, which means they're at the mercy of that one player. It's a monopoly of that one player. So this was South Africa's challenge. They had Afrox, and Afrox had the tender for the entire country and was able to dictate prices. But recently, the South African Ministry of Health and Finance collaborated on a new tender, and now they have Afrox and Air Liquide. So they have some level of competition in the national supply, and we hope that will bring prices down and get a better make the domestic spend go further on oxygen. So we're excited about those developments. Increased foreign investment is the other goal we need to work on. And some of your members may have seen, and the audience may have seen, Dr. Bernard Aleo, who's a Kenyan medical doctor, a champion for many years. He had a vision when he was a young doctor working in Kenya and saw many of his colleagues have to make a decision about who lived and who died because they didn't have enough oxygen. So you have two babies, oxygen for one. You have to decide which baby's going to live, which baby's going to die. You can imagine living with decision after decision like that. He didn't want to. So he said, I'm going to fix this problem. So fast forward a decade, and Bernard launched, I think just last week, the first wholly African-owned liquid oxygen plant in Kenya to serve East Africa. Now, look at it's called Huatele is the name of Bernard's company. Have a look at the foreign investment he brought in. The US Development Finance Corporation, the Soros Economic Development Fund, FinFund, which is the Finnish government's development financing agency, Grand Challenges Canada, UBS Optimus Foundation. They crowded in enough investment to make that viable for Bernard. Once again, it was launched to great fanfare with the US ambassador to Kenya, Meg Whitman, and others. What they're trying to do is build a plant big enough to serve 800,000 sick children every year. So that's going to take that into the whole region. And Bernard's also trying to reduce prices by 30%. So we're super excited. I want to give you one more example. Now we're moving from liquid oxygen to PSA plants. Novair, the great French multinational of PSA plants, recently struck a joint venture with an American company called American Oxygen to commercialize a totally new medical oxygen generation technology called MCOG. MCOG stands for Medical Ceramic Oxygen Generation. This was a technology pioneered at NASA in the US. American Oxygen and Novair have picked it up. They're going to commercialize it. And maybe 20 years, 30, 50, it may take a long time. This will totally revolutionize the way medical oxygen is generated in low resource settings and potentially also on the moon. So that was super exciting. They've announced that. I think the official launch is in Paris in October of that new partnership. So that's on the product side. We're extremely excited about when companies step up and do that. we get very, very excited and we encourage more. But I also want to give a shout out to Air Liquide, because we're also asking companies to do what pharmaceutical companies did a decade, maybe even longer ago. We're asking all medical oxygen companies to have an access strategy, meaning how will they ensure that their product, medical oxygen, which is an essential medicine, that patients, facilities, governments in low resource settings have access to it. So we're asking them to set access targets, to report on those targets in their annual reports, to build an internal team, an access team with people, and even to consider programs, real programs on the ground that test different approaches in low resource settings. So far, to our knowledge, Air Liquide is the only company that has done that. They have a target. They publish it in their sustainability report, their 2023 sustainability report. You can take a look at it. They have a team with a leader, and they have a program called Access Oxygen, which is active in 3 African countries and expanding to more. So that's sort of the gold standard from our point of view, in terms of what a country can do internally to build its bona fides with access, and we'd like to see more of that. And finally, I would just talk a little bit about the people side of oxygen, because if there's one, we're talking about what needs to happen. And it's, I think, fair to say more than 90% of our effort to date, I'm talking about global health, has gone into products and paying for oxygen and different kinds of oxygen products. We've forgotten about the people that are needed to make all of that system work. We've forgotten about that clinicians need to be trained. Ministry of Health officials need to be trained to procure oxygen and negotiate very smartly with industry. Industry definitely has the upper hand, often in negotiating with the public sector. And biomedical engineers to keep this precious equipment working. So we would like to see a lot more investments in the people side of the equation. This is very hard for global health donors to do. They're much more comfortable buying stuff and sending it. But a bright light in the horizon is the Pandemic Fund, which is a new large fund to help countries prepare for pandemics, managed by the World Bank. You can go online and see that. There's a multi-country proposal from Uganda, Malawi, and Nigeria. The governments of Uganda, Malawi, and Nigeria, a multi-country proposal to build regional centres of biomedical engineering excellence in those countries, but serving those 3 regions. Now, industry would be involved in these as well. If they're successful, they get their funding, and these would be centres to make sure the countries have the right supply of biomedical engineers, clinical engineers. They're trained and equipped to keep all of these oxygen equipment working. And we would want to work very closely with industry to make those centres successful. So we have to wait until October to see if that funding comes. It's a sizable amount of funding, and this would go some way towards solving the people side of the equation. So these are some of the things that are happening. We want more of them to happen. And there's nothing like inspiring progress when you can point to a great example. And then, of course, people want to copy it. So we would call industry listening. If you're on this call listening, take a look at those initiatives I mentioned and duplicate them, because we need many more examples of these sort of public-private collaborations.